Well, greetings everyone. Hello, welcome to the Philosophy Club here in Béthette, sleepy middle of the heart of France. And yeah, it's sort of nearly the last week of August. It's like in one of those movies at the summer's end. There have been some classic films, and it's all been a bit movie-like this week here in the village. We had a magical wedding yesterday. Two beautiful young things got married, and we were just starting prayers in Polyhymnia here, and there was this procession of people going past, the married couple and all kinds of people. And it was like something out of a movie. They're all looking so beautiful in their summer best clothes. And suddenly, I don't know where they all came from, but like lots of, exquisite looking muses and young men having, so that was nice. That's like a hymn to life, the joy of life. It's that time of year. I've also been taking part this week on the Irish Peace Front, working with the this campaign to get a new Lex Innocentium launched in Ireland, which would protect non-combatants in times of war. It's an idea that was first mooted by Saint Adomnan, a great Irish Celtic saint from Iona, in Scotland, and I've been to Iona several times, and I've been reading his biography of St Columba, and he had this brilliant idea to outlaw the chieftains of Ireland from killing each other's women and children when they're in battle. He said no, they're non-combatants, and he had enough spiritual authority to make them all come together in a place called Birr and sign a pledge not to kill each other's women and children, and non-combatants like farmers that were needed for the grain or whatever. And that was passed, it was done. So what we're doing is we're relaunching that on the 21st of September in a castle in the middle of Ireland. Anyone that wants to go is welcome. It's in Birr, B-I-R-R. And you can go and be one of the original signatories. Your name will be recorded in posterity because we're burying a time capsule with all those signatories so that people 1,000 years from now can discover it. And what we're saying is that old-fashioned warfare, fine, like swords and bows and arrows. I mean, it wasn't nice, but at least you could differentiate between who the enemy was and who wasn't, and there were certain rules and codes of honour and things. Nowadays, modern warfare is conducted by bombing, planes flying a mile high, missiles launched 500 miles away, mass weapons of mass destruction launched anonymously, drones, etc. So there's no differentiation of competence and non-competence. It's like the whole morality around warfare has completely vanished. And this was brought home to me when I went to Monte Cassino and discovered that the Allies had bombed the monastery against the agreements. So they broke their word. And fortunately a German officer got all the treasures out of the abbey in time to go to the Vatican. But nowadays in warfare, like when Baghdad was bombed by the Allies in 2003 on false pretext, all kinds of ancient precious things went up in smoke. And if, God forbid, but if a war started in the Middle East, World War III with Iran, Israel, everyone joining in. I mean, Iran is a precious ancient civilization full of ancient libraries, precious manuscripts. If all that goes up in smoke with bombing campaigns, it'd be horrendous. So what we're trying to say is, no, we can't do that. And look at what's happening in Gaza. That's a perfect example. There's a robotic logarithm used by the Israeli Defense Force to bomb everybody, called Hasbara, which means the gospel. This is like dark humour. The gospel is we bomb you, And I read that the way it operates is that if there's even the slightest trace that there's a Hamas guy who's been in that building in the last 48 hours, they bomb it immediately, whoever's in there. Like, he's probably left, he's gone, but they blow up his family at meal. And this is why there are 40,000 dead in Gaza, because they use that particular algorithm, which is automatic. It's not somebody pressing a button, it's an algorithm running through the entire defense bombardment system, which triggers then automatically, oh, Hamas fighter spotted sometime in the last couple of days, oh, we'll bomb it then. Now that's when warfare becomes totally immoral and there's no distinction between good and evil. It's as if good and evil have now become blended, and it's just like pick and mix. So that's why we're saying in Ireland that no, enough is enough. We need a lex innocentium for the 21st century. And also, it's also about protecting the environment, because these bombs now are so damaging. The warfare mechanisms, like those vast thousands of pound bombs they've been dropping on Gaza that made like a whole block disappear in dust. These should be outlawed, in my opinion, in our opinion, and because they kill everyone in the block, you know. And so we're calling a new law of the innocents, it's called, and that includes nature, because in this war in Gaza, the water table's been corrupted. They can't drink, you know. But apparently, the Israeli Defense Force flooded the tunnels with seawater to flush out Hamas. Didn't work, but it's ruined their drinking supplies forever, probably, they think. And there's all kinds of pollution now spilling onto the Mediterranean. So we have to stop these. And then there's the Ukraine war, same thing, damage to the environment, mass killing of civilians. In the Sudan, civilians are the victims. So we're saying, on behalf of the civilians of the planet, it's time to stop these warriors doing their thing. They should go and play gladiator games on the Isle of Wight. Let's have an island dedicated to them. They can prove they're strong gladiators with certain rules. And if they want to kill each other to the death, that's fine. You know, we can have Ukrainian gladiators versus Russian, but leave the civilian alone. That's what we're saying on this very important meeting, 21st of September. And what else? So that's one thing I've been doing this week. Monday was the full moon. That was with my group of friends who are into the magical arts and theatre and poetry. We did some meeting for the full moon online, which my daughter was involved with. She didn't come, but some of her friends. And it's always good to celebrate, I think, the full moon, because it's a joyous time, and also we get a little talk about the astrology bit, what's going on in the sky. And I don't have time to be an expert in astrology, sadly. It's like a lifetime's commitment, so it's nice to sit at the feet of an expert and hear. And I have a completely suspended judgment on astrology, how it works, does it work, is it nonsense? What I do know is that many great minds have believed in it over many centuries, and I'm not going to be so arrogant as to say they're all crazy because I'm scientific. No, a lot of what we owe the origins of science came from astrologers who worked out how the stars work and the sky. Very, very clever. So that's been fun. We've got a new visitor here from Italy who's joined us from Rome, and we've been sharing and learning about what goes on in Italian education. I was very interested to learn that they don't teach any Latin in Italian schools, or at least not in, scientific liceo. So I've been learning a lot about what's going on in Rome and Italy generally. And the other thing to announce is we've been working together on a new transcription software that I've got, which takes an audio file and converts it into text. And it's really nice to have help with this, because I've got so much audio recordings, which are on my Green University website, recorded over the last 10, 15 years. And I don't have time to put them into text. But now the AI is quite good, and it can convert them into text in a couple of minutes. And I've got the one we're working on at the moment is the commentary on the Quran. It took me 10 years to write that book, and I used to work really hard, recording like an hour a day at intervals, and I'd have guests coming to the castle in Scotland where I used to live. I was very inspired, and I did huge amounts of research on Islamic history, Sufism, Islamic theology, Arabic, and commentaries on the Quran and stuff. And it's all in the commentary. Plus I go off on all kinds of red herrings, like about Marxism or truth or justice. It's a philosophical commentary. And it's never been done before, because it's in chronological sequence. I've given the order of the surahs as they came through Muhammad, who channeled them. And the conventional Quran is not in chronological order. it's in order of the length of the text, which is something that the early Muslims, including Muhammad, took from the Jewish scriptures at the time, which were done in the same way. It is thought by experts. And what I'm saying as a historian, I'm writing this as an intellectual historian. To make sense of the Quran, we have to see its evolution as these surahs were received. What was the context? What was going on in Muhammad's life, to make that surah come through at that time? And that brings the whole thing alive. It's fascinating. So we're working through, and we it's a few weeks' work to get this whole thing as a text. But I'm determined to publish it so that other people can read it. And other scholars, I'd like to get it translated to Arabic and Persian, so mainstream Islamic thinkers can look at it and, comment. It's using all kinds of modern scientific, historical apparatus that wasn't available previously. I mean, Muhammad's thought world was, forgive me for saying so, but quite limited in terms of its geography. He didn't know much about the geography of the world, didn't know about many religions, didn't know there were, Latin America existed, or the American Indian religion. Had no idea of, he'd heard of China, he knew there was a China, he knew about India. He didn't know much about Europe, actually. He didn't know much about, for instance, the Celtic world. He'd never heard of Druids, etc. So there were certain limitations there, but nevertheless, in spite of all that, his spiritual breadth of understanding is huge. It's vast, and so that's what I'm interested in, the commentary on the Quran. I'm trying to get into that. And I believe this could be a peace-making tool. Instead of dropping bombs on Iran, we should be sitting at the feet of Iranian Sufis and learning about Shiism and about Ali and about the spiritual struggles. Because I think what goes on in history, I'm a bit like, Hegel, obviously. I think history, and Jung, I think history has these moments that are highly textured with meaning, pregnant with meaning, archetypal moments when all of history is recapitulated in a few hours. Think about Jesus and the Last Supper. There were certain archetypal energies around at that time in which the crucifixion is about to happen, and so time then symbolizes eternal stories going on, the storyline of history, good against evil in that case, the innocent teacher being cruelly murdered. It stands as a symbol for all humanity. And you get the same with Muhammad's life. He was simply a teacher, spiritual teacher, trying to give out, prophetic insight to his students. And he was spat on, bullied, and a hate campaign against him by the pagans of Mecca, who were not. They just weren't very bright. That was the trouble. They were arrogant, puffed up, very rich. And they looked on him as betraying their tradition. So they wanted to, ultimately to destroy him. And they came one night to kill him. But his best student, friend, disciple, Ali, had gone and hidden in the bed to take the blows and let Muhammad escape. I mean, that's how close they were. And when the murderers broke in, they saw it was Ali. They didn't kill him. They said, what's going on? You've cheated us. Where's Muhammad? And they couldn't find him. So these are kind of archetypal moments, and that's what interests me in what I call transpersonal history. It's when we can look at the psychological meaning of history through the lens of Jungian thought or, other transpersonal thinkers. And that's why this commentary on the Quran is really quite epic. So that's something else that I'm proud to share. And then the other thing exciting is that as we speak, I've got two friends coming here to France tonight. They're going to miss the Philosophy Club, but one of them is coming all the way from Norway, and the others come all the way from New York. And they'll be here for a few days talking about peace and education and what we can do to save the planet. So there's a lot on, and meanwhile the war in Gaza, it seems a kind of ritual theatre that they come nearly to a ceasefire, and then one of them backs out, normally Israel cancels it, and then the bombing restarts even more. It's become like a ritual now. This is fake negotiations going on. There's a logjam because both sides don't realise that humanity wants them to make peace. for the sake of the children and women and the innocence of Gaza, if for nothing else. But, you know, there's a complete resistance to that. I call that Sophiaphobia, the resistance to wisdom. There's a thing in human beings that likes to do the stupid thing, or the wicked thing, or the evil thing. And I use evil in the sense that Plato did, meaning the path of lack of wisdom. So anyway, that's yeah, so the Ukraine thing, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because Ukraine's pinched some Russian territory. There have been big drone attacks at armaments depots in Russia. Putin has declared a state of emergency because he's really annoyed that they're attacking him. I mean, the guy should just realise that this war's not winnable, and therefore they've got to talk peace. So Modi was just in Kyiv talking to Zelensky for a couple of days. I hope they had a good old heart-to-heart, and I hope Modi goes home and realises he's been back in the wrong horse with his cozying up to Putin. You know, India should be ashamed of itself, in my opinion. But, you know, hey, if they want to do the neutral thing, then they should really do the neutral thing. And they should mediate. And that's what I've been saying for since this war started. So, yes, we live in interesting times. And let's see what you know, more can be done to advance peace in these conflicts. Right, okay, that's any questions now about my little State of the World report?
You mentioned for a second astrology.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you who were those minds that actually believed in it, and if there is any text that you recommend.
Well, I have a history of astrology, which I've got here in the library, and it does list all the ancient thinkers that, you know, some of the great schoolmen, like the teacher of Thomas Aquinas, who was from Cologne, great, you know, universal doctor. Those early university thinkers believed in astrology, because another great thinker was Alfonso IX, king of Seville and Castile, who was responsible for the Spanish Renaissance. He was translating texts from Arabic into Latin. His students, he had a team of translators in Toledo, and he got them to translate astrological works from Arabic into Latin, because he felt, as a king, it's part of a king's royal knowledge is when to launch a war, when to get married, when to have a banquet. So they would consult astrologers for all those kind of matters of state. And he certainly brought astrology into Europe through that Spanish connection, which I've discovered from reading a biography of him recently. He was. It's also interesting because the teacher of Dante visited there and met the king on a mission from Florence, I believe, about trade and stuff. And it's thought that he read an Arabic book about the ascent to the heavens by Muhammad, which gave him the idea for Dante's plot about traversing through heaven and hell. This book argues that it may have come from an Arabic source in Spain that Dante's teacher took back and told them about. So, you know, Europe was really interesting. It was full of much more international exchanges of ideas than we realise at that time. I think it's a conceit of modernity to think we're clever and they were stupid. Because they believed in astrology, they were all stupid. We're clever, we don't, you know. I think that's a conceit that we need to grow out of. The people that, so Michael Scott, who was a great Scottish philosopher, translated Aristotle into Latin. He went to the court of the empire, in Sicily, the Norman kings there. Can't remember which one he served. I think it might have been the Emperor Frederick II, even. And he became his court astrologer. So he was a polymath. He translated Latin, Aristotle, but he he knew enough about astrology if the king wanted to know should his daughter marry such and such. He could cast the horoscope. And it's a sort of, it was a kingly knowledge. The other person that I recommend studying is someone I've been fascinated by for years, is Dr. John Dee, D-E-E, who was the court astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I of England, and a Tudor. He was Welsh, and he lived in London. And when I lived in London, I had an allotment opposite where he's buried. He was an Anglican Christian, a mathematician from Cambridge University, but he was very knowledgeable about astrology. And the aristocrats would come and consult him in his library in Mortlake. You know, he was a friend of Sir Walter Raleigh, who was saying, shall I go off and take the ships out, you know? And he would cast the horoscope. He was an expert in Hermetic mysteries and the Renaissance of Florence, so he had all the books by Pico della Mirandola and all these people. And he knew about the Kabbalah and Sufism, and he was the magus of Britain. And so, who am I to say he was an idiot for believing in astrology? You know, it was part of his job. I'm still trying to get a complete works of his translated into modern English. He did a foreword to Euclid, the geometry of Euclid. When it was translated into English, he wrote the foreword. He was in love with mathematics. He thought it was a divine science. And he loved Pythagoras. And when I was in my 20s, I'd go and sit in the British Museum library and get the old manuscripts of Dee, you know, and read them. And it was amazing. Because we're never taught about these kind of people when we do our studies in Britain. But he also coined the word the British Empire for Elizabeth. He said, you need to found a great British Empire, which will be a thing of peace and justice and wisdom for humanity. He was a peace thinker. So, you know, what's not to like here? I don't think the British Empire always lived up to his ambitions for it, sadly. But, so those are just a few examples that occur to me. There are others. Any questions from anyone else? Okay. Well, look, let's go on. Let's choose our periodic table box. Yes, so you choose first. Which one are you going to go for?
So mine is a new religion movement, and it's Satanism.
Satanism. Okay, yes, that is box number
106.
Yeah. Can you pass me another table from the that envelope? Yeah, thanks. Right. Good. Which one are you going to
I
have?
had the next one, Cosmism and Ufology.
Okay, that'll be fun. Yeah. Right. Well, these are both what we call new religious movements, which is a technical term we use in religious studies to indicate. Yeah.
Excuse me, may I interrupt you?
Sure, go for it. Yeah.
My interest focuses on cosmism, not on ufology,
Okay.
in relation with what we talk about astrology.
Ah. Okay. Sure. Right. Okay. So let's look at these. I'll do Satanism first because historically, well, you can argue which is the oldest, right? They're both new religious movements because Satanism as an organized religion is quite new. There are theories that at previous times in history, in the Middle Ages, in Paris in the 19th century, you know, there were groups of people identifying as Satanists. But as a new religious movement, it sort of came out in California in the 1960s, as most things did, associated with this chap, Anton LaVey, who wrote a thing called the Satanic Bible, which is a little book. So they took this this idea that particularly American new thinkers promoted this, and it's called the me religion. The idea that I'm important, I have rights, and their Bible was this woman called Ayn Rand, who wrote this right-wing kind of individualist thing, that other people well, you know, fine, they do their thing, but it's my rights, my right to power, my right to success and all that. And so Satanism was the inverse of conventional ethics. So you work to promote your own advancement and you don't worry about other people. And so it appealed to a certain type of, I would say, morally unintelligent kind of, yuppie types who wanted the best car, the Ferrari, and the pink Rolls Royce, and £10 million. So Elon Musk is the final example of this. Trump is another one. They promote themselves in their own business world. There was an older type of Satanism which went back to the 19th century to the Promethean thinkers. Shelley was important here, and Goethe in Germany, which was Shelley invoked Prometheus as the patron or the god of the romantic who wants to find ultimate truth, whatever the cost is. And instead of buying religion off a shelf as something called Christianity and just believing in it, that wasn't enough for them. They had to know. And so Shelley was sent down from Oxford for being an atheist, the great poet who influenced me as a boy. I read Shelley and I thought, I want to become a poet. And I admired his intellectual courage because he wanted truth, whatever the cost. Another guy is the Italian Carducci. It was Carducci, the poet, who wrote this hymn to Satan, which was a classic of Italian literature. A romantic period of Italian reunification. We will reunify Italy, even though the church doesn't like it. No, we'll storm that and capture the Papal States. And, Garibaldi, who was a Freemason, and Cavour and Mazzini, they were all the heroes of this romantic Promethean movement, which was Italian reunification. And Carducci wrote the sort of hymn to Satan about all this. Another figure was Bakunin, the founder of the anarchist tradition in alternative politics, who was against totalitarian dictatorship, be it a papacy or a king or a monarch. He wanted free anarchism for the people. He fought on the barricades with Wagner, of all people. It would make a great play. Wagner and Bakunin arguing on the barricades in Vienna when there was a brief revolution in 1848. But Bakunin, was another Freemason who believed that the trouble with the revealed religion of Christian or Jewish or Muslim type was that it perpetuates this thing where God is the good power and Satan is the evil power, and so the poor were seen as witches, Satanists, and they were persecuted by the rich, the aristocrats, throughout history. So what he was saying, I think, and these people were saying, it's the spiritual aspect that Marx left out. Marx said the proletariat have to become the ruling class, and the rulers have to become they have to fall down. But what these Satanists were saying was the ideology that buttresses that ruling class is some kind of religious theocracy. So it has to be challenged. And who better to challenge than Satan, who's been thrown out of heaven? If you go into the backstory of Satan, he was the chief angel of God, created by God, made of fire. He appears in the Bible and the Quran. And then because he dares to question God, the official story is that God ordered Satan to bow down and worship humanity after he created human beings. And Satan laughed at him and said, why? What are you talking about? Look at that little naked creature crawling about. He can't tell the truth. He can't even talk yet. They've got no sense of loyalty, honour. They can't fly. They're not made of fire. They're made of clay. Why should I'm a 60 million mile angel made of fire. I can think telepathic thoughts that resound through the universe. Why should I worship that creature? And he refused. So God, in an anger fit, threw him out of heaven and said, "You terrible Satan, go!" And he tumbled down and fell down to hell, and he's been there ever since. Now that's the official story. However, the Satanists themselves give a different story. And the oldest form of Satanism is probably surviving continuously, is what's called the Yazidi tradition. And the Yazidi is like Middle Eastern Satanism. It's number box 32. It's an old form of Satanism, right? And the Yazidi version of this, and they live in Kurdish areas, Iraq and so on. They're still there. They say that that's not the real story of what happened. That yes, Satan refused to worship these human beings. But at that point, God took him aside privately and said, that was the right answer. Because you know you must only worship your Lord. And so he gave Satan even more power, more support, and elevated him to become like his vice-regent on the earth. And the Yazidis say that is what happened, and that the Quran, the Bible, the Jewish texts don't know this. They've got it all wrong because they've promoted these gods like Yahweh or Allah to usurp the real role, which is the real deity here. And in the name of those gods, they do persecutions and they do religious terrorism against, and they're all fighting over who's the real prophet, which is a sign of ignorance. And so, they challenge Orthodox Islam and Judaism and Christianity, these Yazidis. So, not surprisingly, when ISIS stole power in Syria, they killed as many as they could, because to them they're the absolute heretics. They are challenging the whole basis of Islam, the Quran, everything. And a lot of them were killed. I heard a talk in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh Festival one year by a historian who'd been out there and talked to the Yazidis and learned about their views, and they were being bombed from the air. They were mercilessly killed, women were raped, just shocking stuff. The fact is their religion is much older than Islam. And what's scholars like me, what we think is that Yazidi religion goes back to Zoroastrianism. And it was a variant of Zoroastrianism, of ancient Persia, which is like 1700 BC. So I think that there's a lot of conversations to be had about Satanism. I think it's interesting as a new religious movement. I've met Satanists. I can tell an interesting story in London. When I first got interested in Buddhism, when I was about 19, 20, whatever, I got very influenced by a great Buddhist, Chogyam Trungpa, who was a Vajrayana Mahayana Buddhist, who I didn't meet, but I did meet one of his personal disciples later. He founded a Buddhist monastery in Scotland. And you see, in Buddhism, there isn't really a devil figure. There are phantoms that our imagination creates, but we can learn how to get rid of them, zap them, and be protected from them. And anyway, this friend of mine, friend of Chogyam, was in London in the 70s or 60s even. Chogyam Trungpa who did a degree at Oxford University in psychology after he escaped from Tibet. And he was getting his nice clothes on, his lama robes, looking smart. She said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to talk to the London group of Satanists, giving them a lecture about Buddhism." They'd invited him. So I think the interfaith community, by and large, don't talk to Satanists enough. I've always had this very naughty thought. I'd love to organise an interfaith conference in Jerusalem on Satan and have a proper conversation, Like, the word is from Hebrew and it means the adversary, the enemy. It seems to me we all need to work together to